Hi there, my name is Josh and thanks for joining me today. Today I want to highlight a concept called System on a Chip, or SoC. And to really understand this, you have to go back to before SoC. My journey starts with just tearing apart PCs, looking at the motherboard, and seeing what I can figure out. Now when you do this enough, you start to notice some patterns. There's the CPU, there's the smaller CPU, and then there's the unshielded, just kind of plain PC CPU. I know that sounds really vague and kind of not explained well, but like there was these tiers of this was the cool chip, this is the chip that kind of talked to everything, it might have handled graphics, talking to your hard drives and stuff, it did all that. And then the chip below that handled all of your legacy devices, like talking to your ISA slots, or talking to your floppy disk, or talking to other devices that were very slow and didn't need to be communicated to as fast as other devices such as graphics and network cards at the time. So I was able to recognize this pattern back in my Windows 95 computer. I was able to recognize this pattern in my 2010 Gateway computer. I forget what time it was, doesn't matter. And then also the PCs I build today, they have that same thing of CPU and then that other chip that talks to stuff. Now there's not a third chip anymore and we'll get into that. So it's been a long time tradition for PC makers to have CPU. We have the North Bridge, as Intel would call it, and the North Bridge would talk to all of your high-speed I/O devices, such as graphics and network and maybe USB 3.0, the faster stuff that has to talk to your computer at speeds of maybe over 200 megabits per second. So after that there was the slower, the South Bridge. The South Bridge talked to devices such as floppy disk and hard drives running over the PATA or IDE interface. It would talk to devices like your ISA cards. And ISA cards were very slow, very legacy. They didn't run fast and they couldn't transfer speeds very fast. They did basic device functions such as talking to stuff. So this South Bridge would also handle device functions like I/O, serial communications, which was a relatively slow bus that you would use to control another device. So you didn't need to send data fast to it. That's just how it was for over 20 years, actually. CPU, North Bridge, South Bridge. That's how it was. Stuff was just laid out like that. How did I ever learn about SoCs? Well, it all started back in 2005. Someone made the Xbox 360. Jump forward to 2010 when I actually cared about the Xbox 360. I learned that the graphics card, or the graphics processing unit, was actually built onto the North Bridge as we would see it. And this graphics processing unit would also have control of the RAM. And the CPU was like kind of in its own area up here, like way out of frame. And like when I looked at this, I had to do a double take. I thought Wikipedia didn't load the page right. It was weird. It was just a proprietary PC running Microsoft software playing these games. The games that would run pretty much identically on a normal PC. When I looked at this, it changed how I thought. I was physically looking at the motherboard, and I'll show you a picture here. I looked at the motherboard and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. There's a CPU, there's the GPU, and then there's like this crummy little South Bridge. And I was like, wait a minute, how do they handle the USB devices? How do they handle the graphics, talking to the graphics card? What is orchestrating all of this? And then I did some more research and found out that the graphics card in the North Bridge, i.e. the device that is handling all the high-speed communications, like USB and networking, were built onto the same chip. And this chip was surrounded by the RAM, and it was clear that the RAM wasn't directly connected to the CPU. You could see the traces that went into this one. Now, I didn't think we could integrate components like that. It just seems like it was against the rules. And then 2009 happened. Intel published their specifications and kind of everything and released a bunch of products. And these products were revolutionary because they combined the features of the North Bridge and the South Bridge into one chip, and this chip became called the Platform Controller Hub. So the Platform Controller Hub talked to all the devices except maybe for RAM. RAM was just kind of RAM and the GPU. Like, that's all. It's really high-speed ecosystem of bits flying here and there. And then you have this platform controller hub that talks to your USB, talks to your networking, talks to your audio, talks to your SATA drives, talks to whatever else is in your PC, honestly. This platform controller hub was an integration of these two chips. And I thought, boom, how did they do that? And if I were to take a guess, it would be eliminating some legacy stuff and then also combining more stuff onto the CPU die package. And we'll get to that later. So after my time with the Xbox 360, this was years later, we were kind of still in this CPU platform controller hub, and that's just what happened. I got my hands on a Raspberry Pi 3. So I gotta be honest, it's not really a PC. It has an ARM processor, has a lot of integrated functions. I don't even think it would reach the minimum specifications for like installing Windows, or if you could, it wouldn't be very pretty. This was a very slow general purpose computer. But when I first got it, I did what any person did. They installed Ubuntu, got it working, got a display output, got a mouse and keyboard, and I pulled up Firefox and opened YouTube and I subscribed to this channel and it worked. And like, what? How did this work? This is like a tiny little box. So I did what any person would do. I tore it apart and looked at it very closely. There is only 2 chips on this board. There is a big Broadcom chip, and then there's also another chip that is clearly a USB controller. And you can tell by the traces, and also controls the LAN. Now just one chip has that memory controller, it has the RAM, it has some storage, a little bit, not a whole lot. And then it has the CPU, it has multiple different cores, clocked at a 1.2 gigahertz at the time. And all of this happens on this tiny, 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 tiny little thing. How? How did they integrate so much function onto this? Well, they just did. I don't have an answer for that. But this is getting closer to our concept of system on a chip. So now we have most of the features of the system built onto this one chip. And then across from that is like a supporting chip to talk to our USB, to talk to our Ethernet. Now if we go forward today, we have what's called the system on a chip. The system on a chip is what runs this. This is my smartphone. And if you open up my smartphone, you're probably only going to find one important chip. Just like that Raspberry Pi, most of those features are built onto one chip. These components always include a CPU, memory, input-output, and storage to save stuff for later. So these are kind of the basic parts of a computer that will always be, and just, you know, kind of theory-wise, system on a chip is everything all in one CPU package. And that is where I believe the future we're going towards, as I look at boards and I see them with less and less chips. And I believe that we will move towards a more system on a chip design with all computers that are coming. And while a Xeon processor may always have to be separated simply because of its high heat output, I believe that will turn into be the exception rather than the rule. So I hope this video has talked to you about system on a chip, and I hope that you can formulate the concept that it is an integration of all these different packages onto one thing that does everything, that handles all the input output, that does all the processing, that holds all the memory, that talks to all your storage, all in one chip. So I thank you for watching and hope you learned something. Bye. Peace. Subscribe if you want.